Collision Hub presents The Case of the Zip-Tied Tesla, May 2023. John fell victim to customer service horrors at the hands of a Tesla-certified collision repair facility after sustaining front-end damage during a collision with a deer. Delay after delay, John's beloved vehicle was held captive for over 2 months, costing him more than $1,500 in out-of-pocket rental car costs. But the assault on his pockets was nowhere near as painful as the hidden atrocities to be discovered mere days after repairs were supposedly completed. Finally, back behind the wheel of his Tesla Model 3, at least John could take solace in the fact that his car had been repaired by a certified shop. Though getting to this point may have been a nightmare, he was confident that they had performed the repairs correctly, according to Tesla's requirements. But that confidence would soon be stolen, as John discovered there were a number of loose ends and non-OEM zip ties hanging in the balance. John's relief quickly turned to horror as he realized his nightmare was only beginning, that the crimes committed against him went far beyond the comparably minor indignities he'd already suffered. A mere 2 days after regaining his keys, John began to suspect that his worries weren't yet over when his hood badge started to delaminate. Noticing several additional cosmetic defects within 2 weeks of picking his car up, John decided to have a different TACC inspect the repair. And what they discovered unearthed the truly grave crimes that had been committed against John and his zip-tied Tesla.
All right, everybody, welcome back to episode 2 of the Zip-Tied Tesla. We are really looking forward to this episode specifically. We've got some special guests and some other special things planned for you. I promised it was going to get spicy, and we're going to start getting into some of those details today. But first, I'm going to bring back Chasidy, our professional journalist, to give us a recap so that we can catch everybody up if you happen to just be joining us here on this episode. So, Chasidy, could you catch us all up today?
Sure thing. So the last time we began our investigation into the case of the zip-tied Tesla by explaining how a brief yet unpleasant interaction with a deer on the road in May of 2023 forced John, our Tesla owner, to relinquish his Model 3 to a Tesla-approved collision center, Auto Collision and Glass. For 2 months, he dealt with continued delays, broken promises, and an overall customer service experience that fell far short of his expectations for a TACC, as what should have been a routine repair morphed into a disgraceful series of interactions which lasted over 70 days. With his keys returned, finally, on July 19th, he could at least feel confident that his car was safe to drive again. Or was it? Just 2 days after taking possession of the vehicle, John's hood emblem began to delaminate. Annoying, sure, but it didn't seem to be cause for any real concerns about the overall quality of work performed by AC&G, and that cosmetic malfunction certainly gave him no reason to be concerned for his safety. Probably didn't even consider whether there were safety issues since he had a busy couple of weeks ahead of him with trips planned to Chautauqua, New York, and Michigan. But during those journeys, John noticed some additional flaws in the paint. Recalling the unease he'd felt multiple times while his car was at AC&G, he decided that it was time to get a second opinion. Fortunately, while his car was being repaired, John had attended a Tesla event where he'd met Joe, an estimator at Fetzner's Collision, a Tesla-certified shop in the next county. So on August 2nd, he took his car in to Fetzner's for a post-repair inspection. Since he'd already identified several cosmetic flaws with his untrained eye, John likely expected the certified shop to find something during the post-repair inspection, but no one could have anticipated the devastation that would be found under the hood of John's Model 3.
Well, no, I don't think there's anybody that could have quite understood what was going on with this Tesla. And so it had to end up being somebody else with Tesla training to really take a look at it. John got, I almost want to say, lucky in some ways that he was part of the Tesla club and got to go to the event and meet Joe. But there was definitely going to have to be a secondary inspection. There was going to need to be a professional post-repair inspection of this vehicle. And we're excited that Brian Fetzner from Fetzner's Collision agreed to join and be a part of this show. Brian, welcome. And can you just give everybody a little short background on you?
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here with you all. Yep. So, like Kristen said, I am the owner of Fetzner Collision. I'm actually a third generation collision shop owner. My grandfather started the facility all the way back in 1948. And even before that, the Fetzners were repairing. We had a blacksmith shop in the founding of this town here, Greece, or near Rochester, New York. And we did wagons and sleighs and things like that. And we've been doing always focusing on the customer and quality the whole time that we've been in business. That's how we've stayed in business for so long. And we have been most recently just focused on um, the most safe repair that we can based on the OE and based on like the paint manufacturer. So painting entire unisides, doing post-collision safety inspections, and that path kind of led us to be noticed by some of the, I guess, up and coming brands that have certified programs. Starting with Tesla in 2019, and we were certified with them very early in 2020. I believe in January we started fixing them, and then onboarded with Lucid and Rivian as well. We're working on some others as well that are again restricted parts cars that are kind of reserved for what's supposed to be elite repair facilities. And our facility, of course, that means that everyone there is highly trained. Myself personally, I've been with a mechanical and electrical trim class, which would be like high voltage battery in and out, drivetrain in and out for Tesla, Rivian, and with Lucid. So pretty spun up on the electric stuff. Um, yeah, I think that kind of brings us up to date.
Well, it's great to have you with us, Brian. I am really excited to hear what you have to tell us. So, can you start out by explaining a little bit about why John decided to get a post repair inspection and why he came to your shop?
Yep, I think we began to cover that a little bit in the last episode where John met Joe, who's our one of our estimators. He's the assistant manager there, and he basically explained what was going on to Joe, and Joe kind of had some problems with that. At one point, Tesla would take a very long time with parts, and vehicles would be in the shop for many months. But ever since we've been doing it, that has not been the case. We would typically see a 30-day turnaround maximum, even with parts delays. And his vehicle had been in the shop for over 2 months. So that kind of raised some concerns right away for Joe. And of course, tactfully, probably doesn't want to throw anybody under the bus, but just, hey, this doesn't seem right. Yeah. And John voicing the concerns, Joe kind of agreed with him. And we always just offer, if you follow any of Kristen's content, you know that this is unfortunately pretty common to have poor repairs. So let us take a look at it. Bring it to us when you're done. We'll take a look for free. And like you noted, the delivery experience and the whole experience there was a little rough for John. And he, even again, as the layman who does love his car and love his Tesla, just kind of started to notice some cosmetic issues. And that's typically where we see these kind of problems arise, I guess, is cosmetic issues, panel gaps or dirty things, maybe just weren't cleaned properly, or if the details like that aren't followed, then there's probably going to be more underlying concerns, is what we've seen in our experience.
So, John brought his car to you on August 2nd, and Joe conducted a preliminary inspection in the parking lot and immediately noticed some issues.
Yeah, that's right.
What did he find?
Yeah, and again, we could kind of confirm basically what John was seeing. The vehicle had kind of rubbing compound everywhere, so after a vehicle gets painted, there's dirt specks or whatever is in the paint and it needs to get polished out. That stuff can kind of get into panel gaps and edges and things like that. That was prevalent throughout anything that had been worked on. Like you mentioned, the hood badge was delaminated, and we would later find out that was actually the wrong hood badge. It has the rear gate has a little bit of like a curve to it, and this badge was not designed for the front. So it actually like had a curve to it, and it was stuck on a flat surface, and then it kind of just peeled itself loose. And as we often do, we'll take apart some minor trim curbside or on the side of in front of the building there. And so
Hey,
on a
Brian,
Tesla, yep.
I just want to just gonna chime in here. So they bought the wrong emblem,
Yep,
an emblem that had a curvature to it,
that's right.
and they put it on a flat surface and tried to deliver that to the
Just
customer.
put push hard enough and hopefully it'll stick, but that was not the case. Yeah, that's right.
So I'm just gonna. So this is supposed to have been a Tesla certified collision center that did this repair, right?
Yep. Yeah, and the honestly the kind of shocking part about some of the problems that we discovered is if when everything came out and we had access to the invoices, it was obviously invoiced wrong. So ordered wrong, invoiced wrong, says right on the invoice that it's not the correct badge, and still made its way to the technician to be installed on the vehicle. So
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time wrapping my like. I mean, like I always say, it was a long time ago when I was a tech and working in the shop, right? If I had to go back today, it would take me a very long time to probably do a car right. And I'd probably have to do it 3 or 4 times before it would even get close. But I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty good with Captain Kangaroo's shapes pages. Like curvy doesn't go on flat.
yeah.
I don't have to be. I mean, maybe that's an Arkansas thing, right? Curvy bad, flat good, and that I always say there's always a moment of and in this repair there's several moments of what I would like to call the come to Jesus moments where there was an intent to to there's finite technical things. Like I don't mind it when somebody misses welding or whatever. It doesn't count the right number of welds or whatever because that's finite and technical, but we put a curved emblem on a flat surface. Is that what Joe found? That's
Yeah, that's exactly right. So
okay. I'm sorry. I just had to interrupt there because that one is one like I'm like I think I've got I've got some young kids in my neighborhood, and I think even they probably wouldn't have made that mistake. But okay.
yeah, and again, I don't know. I don't believe that the packaging comes labeled, but you would see that the emblem's bent or curved or damaged in shipping and thought they could make it work or something. I don't really know. But the invoice does, I believe, lists it as like Model 3 rear. So definitely not the right one. Definitely not the same. And yeah, so for us just to be able to kind of get a better look, we can remove the frunk trim or that front cargo area comes out fairly easily within a few minutes. And then we could really start to see some of the more serious underlying concerns that kind of led us to ask John to be able to leave the vehicle. And then the other issue is, of course, the zip tie there was on the radar, and you can actually check that pretty simply as well. Those vehicles will go into and out of service mode pretty simply once you're at a certified facility. It's all just on the touch screen, so we could actually run a pretty quick computer check and see that it had never been calibrated to the vehicle. So the new radar was not like updated to the car, and it had never been aimed. The aim process had never been done. So those kind of couple things of opening the vehicle up a little bit to see the front structure of the car, there was problems, and then as well as just seeing the software and hardware issues with the radar, which we couldn't see yet until the bumper cover was removed. So we wanted to make sure that John was good to leave the car, could get a ride back to Buffalo and things like that before we got a little deeper into it. But the curbside, again, minor issues are kind of pointing toward that this is going to be a lot of problems, just paint defects that were just kind of clear coated over, rubbing compound in all the gaps, and just kind of poor paint work and dirt and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, so obviously this whole series is called the Zip Tied Tesla, and so you alluded to it a little bit there. Like there's so many decision points, and that's what I think drive me bonkers when I get involved in these. There's so many intentional decision points in the repair process where I always say the IDGF moments that you have, where somebody made a conscious decision to not care. One of the most obvious ones superficially and through your inspection is that I mean, it's like I feel like somebody must have been like, "Hey, let's put a brick on it and see if it lays down flat." Right? So we got that problem. But now through your tear down, we find out that they literally take a zip tie and hold on a safety component, a ADAS sensor. They hold it on with a zip tie.
yeah.
And I've shared this picture, I think over the last couple of years, Brian, I've shared this picture of the zip tie a lot because I always go, okay, That angers me. Like, we had the delays. I think, Chassie, you were talking last time that one of the delays in picking it up is they kept saying they had to order this bracket or whatever. Now I'm looking at a zip tie. Um, there wasn't even a care enough to clip the tail off the zip tie. I mean, I think so you can see from this picture, like, okay, great, you put a zip tie on, but you didn't even like care enough to trim it up and try to make it look a little bit better. Then you don't care enough to actually run the diagnostics. I will say it's one of the things that I appreciate about Teslas is they don't require a lot of targeting or a lot of extra things that other vehicles do, that it's all sort of within the vehicle. But you didn't care enough to even then run the software test. Now, I'm from Arkansas, and throughout the course of my life, I would be untrue for me to say that there hasn't been a time that I haven't fixed some stuff with some zip ties and some duct tape in my life. But um I just looked at that picture of that tail coming out of that zip tie and thinking, that technician doesn't care. And that would probably send me in some sort of like panic overdrive. One, if I was the insurer, because as we discovered in the last episode, this shop was a DRP for this insurer. But then two, as the OE, this would send me into like if there was ever evidence that you did not care, that you cared nothing about anything other than like pushing a car out the door and getting a profit, it would be that little zip tie. Like if there had to be like a national emblem of I don't care in
Yeah.
collision repair. I'm sorry. I just got stuck on that when you like I can't even imagine pulling down that bumper cover and staring a zip tie in the face.
Yeah. Yeah, and for whatever reason, I believe I was either away for the day or just out for lunch, and Joe sent me the picture of the zip tie, and it's just like, how can that even be possible that that is done? And like Chastity had mentioned, and the documents kind of show, this was one of the parts that delayed the vehicle. The bracket is like a $3 part or something like that. And again, as everything comes out in the end, there's an invoice for the bracket, but it was never made its way to the car. It was never installed for some reason. And like you mentioned as well, I think the thing that's challenging or just like horrible with this one is there's so many things that give you the option to fix it. If you follow any of the procedures or look up any of the things on this vehicle, I mean, literally, you could have looked up a YouTube video how to pull it up on the screen and checked that it was never aimed, that it was never matched to the vehicle. So lots of checks, that just overlooked on this one to basically deliver something super unsafe to the customer. Um, and I'll say this too, the day that we're filming this, there's a lot of kind of news about like radar and LiDAR and stuff like that. Tesla has gone away from using radar and LiDAR. They used it extensively in most of the newer vehicles. And even the Model Y had it when it came out. And if a vehicle is equipped with that software and that hardware, it does use it. So right now, most Teslas have no radar. At all. It's all vision based, which again, like you mentioned, makes it great to work on as a body shop. It's more simple. But this vehicle did rely on that radar. So if there's any questions about that back then and the previous cars, once they had it, you couldn't really delete it. You can't get rid of it. It's going to use it. So it's a previous generation with older hardware, and it did require that radar, and it did use it for pre-collision avoidance, like we'd see on other manufacturers as well. So
So Joe's curbside inspection found quite a few things that raised some red flags, but he suspected that John's Tesla was still hiding some secrets. So, as Brian mentioned, he asked John to let them keep the car a little bit longer so that Brian could take a look and perform a more thorough inspection when he returned to the shop. Given the lack of communication that John had experienced while his car was at AC&G, he had to be very pleasantly surprised when Brian called him later that day. Not weeks later, he didn't have to call in. Brian called him later that day and invited him to come back in the shop so that he could go over all the things that he had found. So, back at Fetzner's, John found that his car had been laid open to reveal the damage lurking beneath the surface. Joe had found a ton to be concerned about, but Brian discovered some even larger concerns, including issues that made the vehicle unsafe to drive. Brian, can you tell us a little bit more about your thorough inspection and what that revealed?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I believe at this point, I think we just sent John kind of to lunch with a friend before we actually got the bumper off. Like, hey, this isn't looking that great, but maybe it's okay. We often see cosmetic issues, and unfortunately, there's really not much you can do about it, but go after the shop. And so, if it's just cosmetic, it might just be like a, hey, unfortunately, you're out of luck, but let's take a look and make sure. And of course, yes, once the bumper comes off, which kind of requires a little more work, we found that zip tied radar module, which of course is the largest one. So that radar module has like a two-part bracket, and the plastic part that actually locks into is missing, and it just had a zip tie holding it in, so it's just kind of loose dangling. And then it was new, so it was damaged in the deer hit, and it should have been basically the firmware updated or like programmed to that vehicle's software version. And then it has an aiming procedure as well that should have been done with like a calibration test drive. And again, the screen without any kind of like external computer or any kind of hookup, it shows that that was never done. And then the other thing that we found as we pulled it apart was just kind of some mechanical items, basically hardware in the wrong place. Some of the parts that basically are that front crash structure have various bolts of different sizes. And, to me, again, I don't know the tensile strength or anything like that, but just from working on so many of them at this point, again, at that point, we're 4 years into fixing them or 3 years into fixing them. We've done hundreds of those Model 3s, and we know that that bolt doesn't quite go right there, or you have maybe a painted bolt on a spot that shouldn't have a painted bolt. So we can see that there's tons of issues underneath this vehicle, not just the radar, obviously, which is an issue that has to be addressed. But we found, again, mismatched hardware that should have been one-time use that was not replaced. And they do that to basically ensure that the vehicle I guess doesn't like rattle loose, or sometimes you might have a fastener that has a certain tensile strength, and once it's tightened once, it's not going to be there anymore. So, for instance, on the front bumper beam or rebar would be the technical term, and then the crush cans, which hold on the actual rebar to the frame rails, those as well had hardware that shouldn't have been reused, but it was reused. We also saw some kind of, I guess, other odd stuff like Kristen and I were talking about, like the brand new headlight had a pretty big mark on it, like it had been dropped or something. So there's like a dent on the lens. Again, kind of a cosmetic thing, but you are talking about, I don't know, at that point, I'm sure the headlight was at least $1,400. I think they're more than that now. So a brand new part that was damaged. There was also a new radiator support. So it's a plastic component that was also broken. And it seemed to have all the wrong hardware in there. We also had some bolts that go into the subframe that hold a lower kind of bumper support slash lower rebar. Those were all cross-threaded and loose. So again, a bolt with a washer on it, and the washer is completely loose, so not even tightened at all. So again, some pretty big items there. And we also saw, again, even more rubbing compound once everything was apart. It's kind of in all the cracks and crevices and dust everywhere, and some poor paintwork as well underneath. So parts that could have easily been like removed from the vehicle to be repainted that had like some damaged and cracked parts. And I guess the other kind of shocking thing was, like we mentioned with that radar bracket, is a pretty inexpensive part, under $10, but we had some other $10 to $20 parts that actually ended up being repaired pretty poorly. So they're like stretched and kinked, and then they had been straightened back out and bolted back on. But again, not repainted properly, and have the inside underneath the front is all tan, and then there's like black bolts from the fenders holding those on. So kind of just apparent to us that there's tons of issues going on here. A lot of, again, because we're dealing with that front crash structure, and not being engineers, we're just going based on what the repair manual says, right? Engineers built this car, and engineers told us how to fix it. And we can see based on our experience and the evidence that we're looking at visually that it hasn't been done. So, John, I don't think you should drive this car, because if something else happens, I don't know what would happen to you or the occupants in it, kind of a thing. So,
I just want to I mean, before we get to the diagnostics, which is a whole other level, because I always tell shops, like, I don't think I could do diagnostics. I'm responsible for the physicality of the car, right? That's kind of the technician thing. But this is just very I think I still have and I shouldn't, right? So I'm 20 something years into, well, I'm 25 years now into post repair inspections from the insurer side and now from this other side. So I shouldn't be surprised anymore about what happens. But it's almost impossible for me to think that there's a shop that went through the training, that then went through the reinspection process. Tesla sent somebody to that damn shop and looked at it and signed off on it and put them on this program and said that they're qualified or competent enough to fix our vehicles. And then you get this mess. You get this DRP mentality of, I got a bucket of bolts over here and I'm going to hang on to them for spares. Um, Larry did a very good presentation and shared some of that presentation, I think, online a couple of years ago when we were talking about these one-time fasteners, that it's really not just righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, right? Like the engineers design a bolt that works with a hole and that you get to install that once and that there's tensile effects on where the bolt goes, and
Yep.
then there's effects on the bolt. And so the replacement bolt in some cases isn't the same as the bolt you took out because now it has to um, accommodate what the tensile effects would have been on where it goes. And so this isn't a, well, this bolt's still good, I can put it back in. There really is differences in the bolts. And when you hear an engineer, because Larry works with an engineering firm, and Brian, you alluded to, we're not the engineers. When you hear an engineer explain metal fatigue, tensiling, torquing, and why, look, when I do the reinstall, I torque it to a completely different than what it was when it was built at the factory because of all the, when you start to hear all that, you go, oh my God. And that's part of collision technician training. That's part of what this shop, one, should have had to be a DRP, and then two, definitely should have had to be a Tesla certified collision repair center. And so that as you're doing all this, it just is like no one cared. Like there was no care whatsoever or pride. Like, I mean, even if we want to put aside the care for John, and John's the super Tesla fan that loves Tesla, loves the brand, loves the car. Like he really loved this Tesla a lot. I mean, like he really did. But so you have this customer that has all of this. Like, so even if you didn't care for John that much, you should have had some personal pride in the way that your facility repairs vehicles to not have done this. This is just
Hmm.
crazy. I don't know. I just can't fathom it. And I still can't fathom it. So there we go. Sorry.
Uh, Brian, you mentioned that you also ran diagnostics on John's vehicle, as you should. What did you find when you did that?
Yeah, and with that diagnostic, of course, that did show us basically all the error codes. The vehicle has what are called service alerts, and there's some that are customer facing, and there's some that would be like a service fix only. So I don't know for sure on this one if John, obviously he was driving the vehicle, and I don't know if at this time he just wasn't using autopilot often or something like that. But again, the most apparent, of course, is it's really giving us faults for the auto steering. So like all the systems work together, right? Like the front radar is tied into everything, right? So these vehicles can steer themselves, even John's Model 3 that's a few years old, right? So the alerts that we have here is basically the radar one. Of course, it's saying it's mismatched. So the radar that's in there is from who knows when, and it doesn't match the car, which got updated over Wi-Fi last night in John's home, basically, is what that's telling us. And then it does give you an alert that it was never aligned. So again, there's a process that the car remembers. Like it doesn't really have a lot of aiming. The Teslas, like Kristen mentioned, fortunately are I would say pretty technician friendly. You kind of like plug and play on this model. And it will just learn which way it's aiming and kind of adjust the car to that, which is great. And if it's out of spec, it will give you a warning. But they never even tried. They never even ran the protocol to align it. So it tells us that the sensor was never aligned. And that's an alert that's kind of continually popping up. So our log shows it coming up multiple times. And then it's like also giving us a software mismatch, and that would be for the radar as well as the new headlight. So again, the headlight from 2023, and now here we are 2 years later, right in 2025. That car has been multiple times updated and it doesn't match anymore. So there's a process for that as well. And then it's giving us some auto steer alerts. And again, just because the systems are all tied together and things like that. So
Brian,
tons of stuff going on there.
you may not know, but just out of quick curiosity, because we're dealing with so many auto autonomous driving Tesla lawsuits right now, right? Like there's a lot of death claims and injury claims on that. Do you know if those errors would have prevented the car from being put into autopilot? If he had tried, would it have probably told him no because we have too many errors?
It may have, but I don't know for
Okay.
sure. So there are some times when there's certain systems that it will allow to override. And even with the latest software update that Tesla just did, again, we're December 2025, something came out maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And when it comes out, they have to do 2 or 3 iterations. So if a car had just gotten a software update, there could have been also something that was overlooked. Somehow it just doesn't worry about the radar and it still works anyways, even though it shouldn't. And then 2 minor updates later, it might fix that little glitch, but I don't know for sure at that time or if he was able to use it at all. So,
There's a lot going on. So if any of us just put ourselves in the vehicle owner's shoes, my car just got repaired a couple weeks ago, and now I take it for a post repair inspection, and this qualified shop found a laundry list of problems with the initial repair. I I would be very unhappy. How did John react?
yeah, I honestly, I just think he's a dream customer. He's a very level-headed person. And as bad as this is, he kind of just, well, that's almost like that's very unfortunate, but let's carry on. And I believe he was able to borrow a car from a friend to get home. Excuse me, and left the car with us, to just kind of for us to explain, hey, this is what's going on and we'll do everything we can to help you. Like, let's just let it sit here and give us some more time to kind of look at stuff and write you up what it's going to cost, and then we'll see who can pay to fix it, basically, is kind of the way that we'll do this sort of stuff. So um yeah, again, he's a very level-headed person. I mean, really just a dream customer because he cares about having things done properly. And he's totally understanding, even with this mess. It's again, you could if this happened to you, like you said, I mean, you could imagine, like, I would almost want to go right back to that shop right now and flip some tables or something like that. But he was very, very calm, very cool about it. So
Yeah, I think I would be furious. And I think part of my furiousness right now would be because he is that dream customer. Like Tesla should be furious that this is the service one of their super customers got from a shop that they certified and put on their website and said you could trust. So Tesla should be
hmm
furious. John should be furious that he trusted Tesla and took it to a place Tesla told him to, but he was just
yeah.
like, oh, you know what? Everybody makes mistakes. I just, we'll see about fixing it. And I just was like, oh, I'd be tearing through Buffalo right now.
Yeah,
Like,
and I, and I
but
and I
he,
think that was John's initial thought, right? Is that, well, this happens, like, oh, went out on a Friday at 4 o'clock or something. Like, Tesla will take care of me, the shop will take care of me, my insurance company will take care of me. I've been paying in premiums for however many years. That's sort of kind of the standard response that you'll get on something like this. And of course, as we went on, he would find out he was not really going to be helped by anybody, unfortunately. So.
At this point, Brian and his team determined that John's car wasn't safe. So John rented a car through Turo, and then he waited to hear back on what the next steps would need to be. Now, based on his experience with AC&G, he probably didn't expect to hear back right away. So it must have felt like a breath of fresh air when Brian called him the next day, even though that update revealed another problem with the windshield. So, Brian, what did you find there, and what did you recommend?
Yeah, so once we had the car for a little bit longer and we could kind of give a more thorough, I guess, documentation, again, just kind of that initial look, there's some obvious issues and you shouldn't drive it. But now we can thoroughly document like what's actually going on. And I believe at that point too, we were probably waiting for a final bill from the previous shop to just sort of see what they had done and what they had touched. But again, another big safety issue that we found was that the glass was actually aftermarket. So and obviously no manufacturer allows or recommends aftermarket parts. Aftermarket parts, I guess, isn't as well to be confused with like I want a loud exhaust or cool wheels on my car. We're actually talking about like knockoff parts, right? So it's not an original windshield. It's made, somewhere else in some other factory. And then it's, again, much cheaper instead of maybe, again, prices are at that point, I don't know for sure, but maybe $1,000 windshield. Now you have a $60 windshield, a $70 windshield. So you can imagine that the quality is not there at all. And again, with this car, right, like many modern vehicles, camera mounted to the windshield, it's shooting through that glass. So the clarity of it, the angle that the bracket is mounted and things like that are very crucial. So again, another kind of big safety thing of, this isn't right. And so again, just another item where you really shouldn't be driving this vehicle, so.
Yeah, there's two parts to this for me. So I mean, I put on my claims hat too way too often. So the first part of this for me is John was flat out lied to by ACNG. Like there's no other way around it. We can call that kettle black because he was very adamant about Tesla glass. He mentioned it on multiple occasions when talking to the shop. They kept promising him that it was going to be okay and that's what he was going to get. Now, on the last episode, we kind of talk about how we kind of know that's probably not going to happen because the word safe light keeps coming up. So now that was to me saying this is no longer a Tesla certified repair. This shop is treating it as a DRP repair, and a whole new set of we'll call rules are applying to this vehicle. But John was very I want to say he didn't really, and this happens with customers a lot. They don't know how to explain that they want to make sure the bumper fits and this is right. So they find something that they can somewhat draw most of their attention to. Some customers, it's paint. That's why when a customer comes in the body shop, we hear them talk about the paint matching and the paint because they don't know how to express their other concerns about safety and quality and whatever. John was pretty adamant about this windshield and he kept getting a story and promised lots of things. And it's very clear that whoever the estimator or person assigned in this office was they were just telling him a story to keep him off the phone. I don't really want to deal with this customer, or I don't want to deal with having to explain that the insurance company's not paying for this because it's in our DRP program. And we made a promise that we were going to use Safe Light because they're called auto collision and glass. Is that not correct? Right?
That's right.
Right. So they're supposed to be able to do glass, but then they're going to send it out to Safe Light, which I mean, they just really sort of didn't explain that at all. And they knew exactly what was happening and they just sort of refused. So to me, it's more of a fraud, just integrity thing than it is a safety thing. But there are real safety issues when we talk about forward-facing cameras and glass. And there are some studies. The National Highway Transportation and Safety Administration has looked at it. They did one with a Honda on what the effects were when an aftermarket windshield was used versus the OE. And so there are some real legitimate reasons. Every OE wants to sell parts, and I fully understand that. But when it comes to windshields in forward-facing vehicles equipped with forward-facing cameras, it's not just an attempt to sell glass. And most OEs will tell you they don't want to have glass because it's so hard to ship and keep in dealerships or whatever. But there are some real legitimate safety issues. But clearly, this shop didn't even think about that because they didn't even think about working with the cameras and resetting them or doing anything anyway. So, why should I worry about the glass at this point? Yeah, I'm frustrated for John.
Like we talked about last time, John did do his due diligence and even called SafeLight and was told that they would source the glass directly from Tesla. So he poor guy did his best to cover his bases, and people just kept lying to him. I mean,
And that's what I mean. Like, I just from an insurer standpoint, and then what the Tesla certified collision people. So all those people that work for Tesla and draw a Tesla paycheck, you get that honor because you have a customer that loves your vehicle. I get to be an adjuster. I get to have that honor because I have a customer that pays their premium. So I think out of all of this, if I'd have been sitting at corporate, if I'd have been the insurer again or whatever, what would have probably angered me the most was that there was such intentional misleading of a customer who was asking a direct question. And I feel like he was intentionally lied to and misled. And if you don't even have that level of integrity, like if your character is so low that you won't even have that conversation about a windshield, I can't trust you with anything else. What are you going to do when it's a suspension problem or an, or a whatever, or battery pack damage? Like this one really sort of said, like, everybody's like, Kristen, you should be mad over the zip tie. I'm like, well, no, I'm mad about that, but I have seen technicians do worse. But it's everyone knew what was going to happen to that car. Everyone knew it wasn't going to get a Tesla windshield. That's why it was going to Safelite. Safelite knew they weren't doing it either, and everyone just kept telling John a different story, and that's just it's wrong. It really is wrong. And that really should have, in my mind, set a lot of people off. And John's still like trusting everybody and God love him. Again, perfect customer and everyone let him down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one other note on the glass that would kind of the evidence of this would come out later is that glass camera, it's like a triple camera that's mounted to the inside of the windshield, actually does have an aiming procedure. And that's like one of the only things on that car you need the Tesla laptop toolbox software to use, or to do rather. And there's a target that you put in front of the car to check the pitch of the camera up and down. And it has a range, but ACG did not do it, and they said that Safelite did. And again, I don't think that Safelite has the ability to do that, and they kind of just had it listed on their build that they had done it. When you can basically save that screenshot as kind of how we prove that we've done it, right? When you get the screenshot of what the camera does, you get a picture of it for the file or whatever, and we couldn't prove that anybody had actually done it. Again, wasn't listed that ACG had done it, and they said, "Oh, Safelite did that for us," and I don't believe that Safelite at that time was doing anything like that. So
No, I'm going to be with you, Brian. I don't believe that Safelite had a technician in Buffalo, New York, running around with a Tesla laptop. I'm gonna call
I
that
don't
one.
think they I don't think they do any calibrations, right? Don't they always pass it off to the customer to take care of it afterwards?
I don't know. I, I hate to say that I've never cared enough about Tesla. Well, that's true. I don't care about them either. I've never cared enough about Safelite to even look into their business because I'm like, you're not coming on the shop lot. Like, I don't even need to know what you do because you're not touching a car. So I don't know. I'm going to offer an opportunity for Tesla to chime in on the comments, or Tesla for Safelite to chime in on the comments of this and let us know what they do. But that also would be an interesting because part of the Tesla service agreement is you're supposed to be able to do all this stuff. So why would you be allowing a third party to do it that doesn't do it? So that, that goes back to that. You can't serve two masters. There's zero way you can be a DRP and OE certified, but okay. So, well,
Right.
Safelite, you are welcome to chime in on the comments. I welcome it.
That's a scary challenge, Kristen.
Yeah, bring it.
So Brian, you tore the car down, you disassembled, you found all this stuff. Um, John was very like casually receptive and nonchalant about it, which is quite impressive. Uh, what happened next?
Yeah, so at this point, we again have the vehicle fully in, able to just kind of dig into it a little bit more diagnostics. And again, we're trying to be as uninvasive as possible. We don't know what the outcome is going to be, or what if no one pays for it, John's going to pay for it, and what does he actually want to pay for, right? It's kind of like not my problem, I guess, essentially to fix all the cosmetic stuff, but like the safety stuff will probably get done. And so just giving him a thorough breakdown of kind of like the three categories we always break it into, and this is kind of coming from Larry and Kristen's teaching, is the stuff that they did so poorly that we have to redo it. So there's an estimate for that. The stuff that is basically fraud, right? So like in the case of the windshield, it isn't listed anywhere, but somebody put it in, which is again, that's like a New York State violation. If you touch the car and do anything, it should be listed. So what's up with that? And some other, other items on the final bill that again were paid for, but we could see were not done. And then the third one would be all the stuff that they didn't even write, all the damage that was never never touched at all, basically. And I think when we added all of it together, we were somewhere in the 25 to $30,000 range of like, hey, all this is so bad. I can't even fix these parts. I need to replace the hood. I need to replace the fenders because the repairs are so bad. And then all the stuff that they missed, was multiple thousands of dollars. And then all the stuff again that was fraud that I had to redo that they did so poorly or whatever you want to say. And then, we basically present all that stuff to John and just let him know, hey, this is what we have. This is probably your next best course of action. And, it's really the ball's in the customer's court at that point. Like, what do you want to do to try to get paid for this? And at this point, it kind of became like a waiting game. He's going to send it to his insurance company and reach out to the shop. And on our end, the only thing we can really do is ask for the stuff that's never been paid for, right? So, hey, you never paid for these new bolts that should have been new. Can we get paid for those? And, we would later find out that NYCM would just kind of deny that. They wouldn't actually pay for anything. They really just denied a lot of stuff on this claim. So, unbeknownst to us, like why they wouldn't pay us, but they would pay AC and G, I don't know. We couldn't really ever determine that. And John could never really get an answer, anyone to kind of shoot straight with him. If the wiper arms got damaged by the hood when the deer hit it, and it never got paid for, why can't we get paid for it? And they would never, they just denied that damage. So, again, for us, right, cosmetic stuff, John's still driving around with scratched windshield wipers as a solemn reminder of this whole incident.
We will talk more about what happened when John reached out to his insurer next time.
Okay.
For now, we'll just say that there are some complications with that whole process, just a few, which started to pop up pretty quickly. What I will say about that for now is that once NYCM was aware of the post repair inspection, everything that you guys had found, their immediate response was AC&G offers a warranty, and they began to pressure John to allow their DRP shop to fix its errors. But understandably, John was a little bit hesitant to return his beloved Model 3 to the shop that had already compromised his safety. We'll be tactful about it and leave it with that. So there was some back and forth between John and the insurer throughout August. At this point, we get into the first week of September. John's car has been sitting at your shop for a little over a month now. So this is when you decided that you would get involved a little bit more, and you suggested that he consult with a collision expert, our own Kristen here.
Yeah. So this is where I get the call, and I'm finally sort of made aware of all this that's going on. And I'm floored at multiple things. I'm mad at ACNG. I always just say it's not like law enforcement or medical. It's not like you took an oath, so to speak, but you made a promise that you were quality and that you were going to do a good job. You made that promise through your DRP, but then you also made it to Tesla. So I was furious with them. I had no confidence in Tesla. I'd already had multiple run-ins with Tesla corporate employees that were doing the certified collision repair program. And I already had my own feelings about how Tesla just did not care about quality collision repair or the service their customers have gotten. And so my first phone call with John was basically, I hate to tell you, but you're probably going to have to get an attorney. Like he was more focused on what his insurance company wasn't doing. I was disappointed with the insurer. It really felt like they were more in defense mode. And this happens a lot. It happens to me in post repair inspections. Like you make a phone call, you're Brian or you're me or whatever, and you're like, hey, we got a car and here's some problems. And almost immediately you become the villain in the mind of the insurer and in the mind of the shop. You're out to get them. You're a bad person. You're creating drama where there shouldn't be. We've got a warranty. You should just let us refix it. And I think that's one of the problems. Every insurance company, when you get told that there's a post repair inspection problem with one of your DRPs, your whole world should stop because customers have trusted you. They've paid you premium. They believe you more than anybody else. And so they trust that you're actually like looking at these shops and making good decisions based on quality, not by on the people that are willing to do it for your rate or greedy or whatever. But I could tell that we were in that mode where the insurer and this body shop, a C&G, and I'm going to keep talking about them and their logo and their I made like make posters with the front offices of their shop so that everybody in Western New York can know where not to go for any repair, much less a Tesla. But they were almost in this defense mode of it's Brian's fault, not their fault. It's not, John as a customer, it's not their technician, it's not whatever, but kind of making Brian out to be the villain in a lot of ways. And so my first thing was like, we do need to get the three boxes. I call them the three buckets, so to speak. In all of my experience doing post repair inspections, there's going to come a finger pointing moment, and it happens. What should have been paid on the claim that wasn't paid? So what is John legally and contractually entitled to under his claim? That may mean the estimate gets bigger. It may become a total loss from the first loss, not necessarily because of the poor repairs. Then there's that secondary bucket of, okay, well, what did the shop charge for, but then not perform properly? That's going to hit different states' consumer protection laws around workmanship. So you hear that word, insurers like to use it, workmanlike manner. That's where that comes from. You took a job, you accepted it, you brought this vehicle in, you said you could fix it. You are supposed to perform those repairs in a workmanlike manner. And so if we can have that bucket that shows what you did not do in a workmanlike manner, there's recovery options for that. And then that third bucket is what did you charge for, but you didn't do, whether that's parts you charged for that you didn't actually replace, whether it's repairs, whether it's refinishing that you didn't do. Like we had some panels that just weren't painted at all, that had been on the estimate. That's fraud. That's you took money from somebody. You said you were going to do something. What you said influenced, so it's fraud on two part. It's consumer fraud and it's insurance fraud. You said to an insurer, we're going to do these things and you should pay us, and you accepted monies from an insurer and then you did not do them. And so there's different legal ramifications for consumer and or insurance fraud. So it's very important that we establish the three buckets. A lot of people just like to go, what's it going to cost to fix all this? And they write one big estimate. And then we're sitting there, either pre-trial or discovery or whatever, and I'm then trying to separate out the three buckets because that's going to come into play when you're going to have a shop go, well, it's not our fault, the insurer didn't pay for this, and the insurer is going to go, well, you didn't ask me to pay for that. And when we're doing all the finger pointing, and I bring an insurer in, I want to make sure I address my questions to their particular bucket. And then how they feel about the other buckets is very important. But yeah, that was my first conversation with Brian and John was, one, I'm angry. Two, I think Tesla's about to screw you over. While John's telling me, no, 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 I love Tesla. You don't understand, Kristen. And I'm like, well, whatever. I think they're about to, show you something you don't like. And then we talked about the buckets and getting those all sorted out.
And there was one overarching question that Kristen wanted an answer to.
Yeah, I mean, my very first question, honestly, is the vehicle safe to operate? Yes or no? Um, we don't like to take, I mean, everybody always thinks that the first thing we want to do is tear a vehicle down, make it non-drivable and start, charging for things. We don't. I mean, if there's a reasonableness to return the vehicle to you, or if you elect, hey, I have problems, I have concerns, but if you want to drive it, here you go. Like I'm okay with those things. But that's the first question we have to ask, and then we have to explain the safety issues to the customer so that they fully understand where they're at.
Oh, Brian, was John's car safe to drive?
No, I don't think so. Again, based on the fact that it could drive itself, should be able to drive itself. No, it shouldn't have been driving it at all, I don't think. So
Um, Basically, based on the documentation, the general consensus at the end of this was that if a shop couldn't even take care of some of the simple things like runs in the paint and the correct hood emblem.
Yeah,
How could you trust them with safety related repairs? Why should John take his car back to AC&G for them to fix their mistakes?
I don't think I would take a wagon back to AC&G to even like, I wouldn't take anything to them like at all. Well, unless it was somebody I didn't care about, then maybe I'd take a car to them for that. But I think for insurance companies, we use the warranty a lot of times as our get out of jail free card for not having to do nothing. When an adjuster doesn't have buy-in for customer care and concern, you want to drop kick that vehicle as fast as you can and get it off. Well, hey, this has nothing to do with us. We already paid for the
Mhm.
repairs once. You got to go back and see the shop that fixed it, right? And that's sort of I always say the drop kick and punt method of getting it off my desk. But
Mhm.
in any civil case, particularly around contractual, and this could be like a plumber, this could be a deck, somebody builds a deck or a fence for you or whatever. Sure, there is sort of an understanding that that service provider should get sort of a chance to make it right, right? Like if we had a world in which everybody didn't like something and immediately ran to somebody else, had them completely redo the job and come back and present a bill, that would be very hard for small business in our American society to exist. So sure, there is a little bit of an element in that part that you should get sort of a right to correct it. If it had been paint, if it had been DNIBs, if it had been whatever, then that I often coach customers. That's a reasonable request to go let that shop try to do the refinish. We're going to reinspect it again, right? But to do that, when you've done this level of garbage, and there's no way around it, we all make mistakes, right? Everybody makes mistakes. This was intentional. This is not a technician in a stall doing stuff in the dead of night that no one is aware of. For as long as this vehicle was in the shop, for the parts delays and the excuses that they kept giving the customer for what they kept telling about him about a windshield, this was intentional. They didn't even use basics of care. You put a zip tie on a safety component for Christ's sakes. Like it's not even close. To an insurer or AC&G to think that it was even remotely reasonable for John to return to them to do any such re-repairs, even like buff an offender. That wasn't even remotely a fair ask. And I can't believe there was an adjuster that maybe those words came out of their mouth to say you should take it back. I can't, in all my years, I when a customer got really messed over by a shop, a couple of things happened. One, we went somewhere else with that car because that wasn't, why would I in good conscience want to send you back to a store that just screwed you over when they did it under my name of my DRP program? That's dumb. And then number two, that shop was immediately suspended. It may have been completely removed from the program if I found a large level of fraud and problems, or maybe they went on a 30-day, 60-day suspension until they had like a work, a performance improvement plan to prove that they were never going to make these kind of mistakes again. But it was absolutely unreasonable for an insurer to even remotely suggest that John should take his car back to the people that lied to him. There's no sugarcoating it. He was lying.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. It's I think that's the fact that you can look at the totality of everything that was done. That's really what made, I think, John, you know, and I say earlier, right, he was pretty calm about it. I think he still obviously is still very upset about everything. He just took it well. He didn't go kicking and screaming about anything, but very upset that a shop that he thought was certified would take care of him, would use OEM parts like the certification required, to again put aftermarket glass in to miss all these major things. And then, of course, on top of it, he is a person who's not just like, oh, my car's shiny again. We have even on top of all the safety things, cosmetic defects, parts put back on that should have been replaced and parts installed wrong and new parts damaged. So the list that we had given him, again, adding everything up that needs to kind of be retouched to make it perfect when you're over $20,000, you can understand why he absolutely did not want to have it, fix anywhere, any one of their shops or let them touch it any time again. So,
Episode 2 Wrap Up.
So after all of these conversations, John was thoroughly convinced that he did not want to return his car to AC&G. But NYCM just kept responding that that needed to be the next step. Again, we're going to dive into those interactions a lot more next time. But one thing that stood out is NYCM actually contacted AC&G, informed them of these issues that John had with the vehicle. And if John had any qualms about his decision, I'm pretty sure they were put to rest when he got a call from AC&G's new manager, Kevin Gross, who offered to handle the re-repair of the vehicle. And during this conversation, Kevin acknowledged that the zip tie that was found on the forward collision device was unacceptable. He assured John that the manager and the employee who performed the work were no longer employed with the company. But what really had to be a painful thing to hear was he just kind of, nobody's perfect. That was his excuse for all of this. And surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, that justification didn't really do anything to dissuade John from his conviction that taking his car back to AC&G would be pretty irresponsible.
Look, this is a common thing too in post repair inspections. You'll have, we deal a lot with MSOs. You'll have a regional manager call a customer and go, I'm going to personally guarantee and oversee your vehicle being repaired or whatever. Everybody, oh, or we have a new manager and I would never do these things. That's never a way to handle them. So for any of shop or insurance or whatever, I still can't believe the insurer was continuing to push this and they weren't losing their mind. I don't even know who is the direct repair manager for that territory for that insurer, but whoever it is, they should have been fired along with the manager of ACG. Like whatever happened there. But Kevin Gross, Mr. New Manager, that's not the way you handle these. You don't call somebody and go, well, nobody's perfect, Nobody's perfect is a great response to if you didn't match the paint. Zip ties on safety components, damaged parts, uncalibrated and updated modules, that's well beyond nobody's perfect. That's nobody gives a damn, is what that is. And so to keep asking a customer, I'm furious. And I think I just still couldn't believe John hadn't quite. I was so glad that he at least picked up on the nonchalant, we don't really care about you mentality that Mr. Gross there was communicating. Again, it really just kept feeling like, and I just want to, it kept feeling like Kevin there and the insurance company were really more blaming the shop that had done the post repair inspection. So in this part, Brian, and I get that all the time. People will call and go, she's just trying to make money off of body shops that are working hard. No, because I do most of my post repair inspections for free, so I'm not making money. But there's that instantaneously the person in the story that should be the hero that's stepping in and saving the car and the customer becomes the villain. And I think that's why they behave this way. And it's why the insurer was talking that way to John. It's why the body shop was talking that way to John. But saying nobody's perfect is, there's a meme that says when you're in an argument with a really upset woman, the first thing you should never say is calm down, right? Have we all seen that meme? Same thing that you should never say to a customer, nobody's perfect when you've screwed up their car. Yeah.
Very true. Definitely not something you want to say, but it is true that nobody's perfect and everyone does make mistakes. But typically, mistakes are a learning opportunity as long as no one's harmed in the process. And luckily, John avoided any repercussions from AC&G's imperfect repair without being harmed. But his relationship with them began with minor customer service offenses and now had escalated because he knew that the repairs they performed were unsafe and could have endangered him. If he had not noticed those cosmetic flaws, who knows what would have happened if he hadn't sought out a post-repair inspection. So Fortunately, he found a shop that was capable of restoring his beloved Model 3 to a safe condition, and ignoring pressure from his insurer to allow AC&G to perform the corrective repairs, John authorized Fetzner's Collision to restore his vehicle to OEM specs on May 25th. Again, we're still in 2023. And he agreed to pay out of pocket while he continued to work out the details with his insurer.
Yeah, and I still was just and I can remember very vividly my last like my phone conversation with him is that this insurer is not going to help you. This shop is not going to help you. This is not going to work out. And all John kept telling me is, no, I know people at Tesla. I'm part of a software testing group that tests, new before it's rolled out to people. I'm not your average Tesla consumer is what he kept saying. And I have full confidence that, ultimately Tesla is going to help me, even if it came to he in his mind, I think he believed Tesla would talk to his insurance company. But I just kind of went, okay, y'all authorized Brian, he agreed to pay, and I'm like, okay, whatever, but call me back when you realize I'm right. Was kind of how I left it with him. So
So now that he's authorized, Brian, how long was he had dropped his car off August 2nd? How long was his car in your shop?
It was in the shop from August 2nd until November 1st of 2023, so about 3 months.
Okay. Yet, unlike the initial repair at AC&G, which took over 2 months, John's loss of his vehicle for these few months isn't the fault of the repair shop. While Fetzner's Collision diligently strove to restore John's Model 3 safely, uh, the repairs were delayed as John struggled to convince his insurer that those corrective repairs were necessary and should not be entrusted to AC&G to fix.
oh, you mean he shouldn't trust the original shop that lied to him, held his car for forever, didn't replace parts that were damaged, missed a ton of damage that should have been estimated, didn't do any of the calibrations, and held a safety component on with a zip tie. He's supposed to trust them? Yeah, that makes total sense.
No comment. But next time, we will continue our investigation by following the clues and examining the evidence to identify who else is guilty of the disgraceful outrages against John and his zip-tied Tesla over the past 2.5 years.
Yeah, and this is where this list of who gets the blame and who gets to get in the boat gets a little bit longer or more in depth with different companies. So, Brian, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. I think as we tell this story a little deeper over the next episodes, the audience is going to really understand what the consequences were for you for taking a stand for this customer and doing the right thing and being involved in this post repair inspection. So I applaud you for continuing to have the character and integrity that ACG did not have. And we need more of you. And I know that's when you're 3, 4 generations into this, it's just part of who you are. It's not what you do for a living. It's adjusters. It's what they do for a living. These people that work for Tesla, it's just a job that they got out of college somewhere. But for people like you and me, this is just who we are. This is our blood. So thank you for being here,
That's right.
Brian.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate
All
it.
right.
Delays lasting 2 months should have been the worst of John's experience with the Tesla certified shop that repaired his vehicle after colliding with a deer. But when a post-repair inspection by a qualified TACC revealed that the culprit's crimes against this Tesla owner reached far beyond mere insult into the realm of reckless endangerment, his faith in the original shop was understandably shattered. Still, John remained confident that the situation would be resolved in his favor. After all, his insurance policy ensured he would be made whole after an accident, and certainly this could not be considered whole. And since Tesla had certified the shop that performed these horrendous repairs, they would surely stand behind him. especially considering how many times A, C, and G had failed to adhere to TACC standards. Or would they? Although blame for the initial crimes against John clearly lie with the shop that had performed such egregiously faulty repairs, subsequent interactions with John's insurer and vehicle manufacturer began to indicate that the shop was not the only one culpable of failing John. Examining these responses will send the investigation of the zip-tied Tesla in a whole new direction.